And he said to them, listen, Israel's going to govern this land, and you're going to be residents with upward mobility, and this is how it's going to work, and you're not going to have this corrupt PA on you. And the Sheik looked at Noam and he said, I like it a lot. Now you're going to have to force me. And if you force me, and he didn't say these words, now I'm adding, if you force me, I'll follow it and we'll all be happy.
Yishai Fleisher, welcome to the One Jewish State podcast. It's great to be with you. We know each other a long time. We've worked together on some great projects, including the movie that you helped me with, Route 60, the Biblical Highway, that I made with Mike Pompeo. And it's great to have you here. Before we start talking, I just want to, if I can, maybe just kind of set the table for you so we can focus the conversation. You know, my book's coming out, One Jewish State, coming out in a couple of weeks. We're starting a movement called One Jewish State, and it's based upon this thesis that we're living at a unique time where whether you're right or left, whether you're religious or secular, if you're just looking for the right outcome, for a smart outcome, to make progress and bring some stability, peace within the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, all roads lead to one Jewish state. You know, whether you care about geopolitics, you care about economics, you care about national security, you care about human rights, or you just care about faith, right? Wherever however you drink your coffee in the morning, they all converge at the same place: Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Now, you and I have felt this way for a long time. You know, we've talked about this for a long time. But in the aftermath of October 7th, with 80+% of the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria approving, the greatest assault on the Jewish people since the Holocaust, it became obvious that, the two-state solution is dead. Again, you and I have felt that way for quite some time. But then, it's not a full answer to say the two-state solution is dead. It's, okay, if that's the case, then what? And that's what One Jewish State seeks to start answering and developing a discussion on. Tell me a little bit about how you come to this. You're the spokesman for the city of Hebron, one of the holiest places in the world, served honorably, courageously in the Israel Defense Forces with great success. How do you come to this? I sort of gave you my story. Give me your story about how you approach this issue.
Well, Ambassador Friedman, first thing, thank you very much for having me here, and congratulations on the new book. It's very important in your bringing the rational solution into general conversation, and that's what we have to do. We have to come back to common sense. So the approach is, you could approach it religiously, you could approach it in many different directions to come to a very rational and simple conclusion. And to do that, you just have to step a little bit back, which is look at the region, geopolitically. Look at it. And what you see is that this is a tribal region with 22 Muslim Arab countries and many more Muslim countries that are not Arab. And you see within that there's ethnic minorities that have their own defensive areas so that they could continue to thrive. A great example of that is the Kurds. The Kurds are people without a state, but so far they've managed to get an autonomous region in northern Iraq. And these folks have been troubled by the Iraqis, by the Turks, by the Syrians, by the Iranians, and yet they finally managed to get a little piece of land that they can call home, and they defend it with a strong army they call the Peshmerga. And they survive. Other ethnic minorities that are not Muslim, not part of the ethnic majority, they struggle and they get bullied. And so the people that survive that are not part of the ethnic majority are armed, are defensive, and they have their space, and it's recognized. So too Israel. Israel is the one Jewish state, as the name of your book. It's just that it's so simple. And so it exists by the virtue of the fact that it has a historical connection to this land, recognized as such by international law in truth, and it is the ancestral land, and now it has an army that sits on its borders and defends it. That does not mean that we have to be in constant conflict with our neighbors. The opposite. We're Semitic peoples. We are like the Arabs. We have a similar language, similar religion, similar DNA. We're an Abrahamic peoples together with the Arabs. But to make it in this tribal region, you have to have your own space defended. You have to have your own army. And after you've got your strength, then you can move forward and have regional cooperation.
Let me just stop you there for a second, because you said something important, and I want to just expand that a little bit. 22 Muslim nations that border Israel, or countries that border Israel. Around 40 Muslim states around the world. You don't hear a thing anywhere around the world. Nobody challenges the right to have multiple Muslim states, 40 Muslim states, right? All we're looking for is one Jewish state, right? One. There's never going to be a second Jewish state, right? This is an area the size of New Jersey. The Jewish people have the greatest claim to this land than any other people to any place of land anywhere in the world, right? Because it goes back the longest, pursuant to a book that sells, I think 2,000 copies an hour on Amazon, only in the United States, 20 million copies a year in the United States. Just want one Jewish state, 40 Muslim states, another 30 Christian, Hindu, Buddhist states. Why does the world begrudge the Jewish people just one Jewish state?
Well, before we answer why, the answer is they do.
They do.
They do.
Yep.
And that's, and you could say maybe it's a specifically anti-Semitic or specific to Jewish people. But as I point out in the example beforehand, the Kurds also have problems. Why does the world begrudge a Kurdish state? I don't know.
Or the Tibetans, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or the Taiwanese.
Right.
So the people have issues for some reason, whatever the technical reason is. But the fact remains. And so the Jewish people know their identity, know their history, know their connection to this land. And I can't solve the psychological problems that Nazis have, or whatever other group has with the Jewish people. They have some problem with us. But we've got to lay out a narrative that's clear. And it's important to also say that there are many countries that do support us. There's today an alliance of nationalist, pro-family, pro-Bible, pro-conservative, pro-patriotic, anti-jihadist states that are with us. They may be states that were not so for the Jewish people not so long ago, like Poland and Hungary, or the UAE. So today we do have allies who understand the importance, and you and the amazing team that you were part of were at the forefront of bringing together a consciousness that even here in the Middle East, Arab countries, moderate Sunni states and others, understand that a strong Israel, a one Jewish state, is actually a solution to Middle East problems, with more technology, with more tourism, with more opportunities, more health for the peoples, plural, of this region. So there's people who have problems, but we can't wait around to figure them out. We gotta push forward.
So let's boil this down to more specific issues. The book doesn't attempt to justify the existence of Israel writ large, because why should it? As a country, no country should be forced to justify their existence. But there's that piece of biblical Israel, right, that we call Judea and Samaria, which has, of course, Hebron, which you're so familiar with and which is such a holy place, but also Shiloh and Bethel, Bethlehem, the altar of Joshua, Shlem. I mean, places of massive biblical importance where the story of the Jewish people took place, the story of, frankly, the Christian faith comes out of. And we're still fighting for that. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that almost no one in the world thinks that the Jewish people have the right to live in their biblical homeland. I mean, Mike Pompeo thinks they do. I think they do. I think President Trump thinks they do. But, we're a small minority. We're a minority within our own country, or hopefully one day to be the majority, but we don't know that. But let's just talk about Judea and Samaria, because the biblical issues are there. You can talk about that. But, not everybody believes in the Bible. Not everybody's a person of faith. I argue that Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria is the best outcome, even for people of no faith. People just want to get to the right geopolitical, economic formula. Let's talk more about Judea and Samaria.
It's a big topic. First, we have to take a step back and take a look at just historically how the situation manifested itself. And the first thing is that in 1917, the British come and they kick out the Turks. And they recognize that the Jewish people are the indigenous people of this chunk of land. And they write a document to the effect called the Balfour Declaration. That's later recognized at San Remo, and later recognized as the mandate for Palestine, the mandate for Jewish Palestine, 1922.
Which included Jordan at that time.
That's right. It included Jordan, which was called Transjordan at the time. Then the British will cut away Transjordan and give it to their friends, the Hashemites.
Stop there for 1 second because it's an important point. When they did that, they took 72% of mandatory Palestine that had been earmarked for the Jewish people, cut it off and gave it to the Hashemites for Jordan. So already, right, before we even talk about the state of Israel, we're down to 28% of the mandate for Palestine. That was earmarked for the Jewish people.
And if you're going to go into that parentheses, there are some people that say, well, that was the creation of an Arab Palestine. You took away a chunk of Israel, a chunk of Jewish Israel, gave it to the Arabs. Today, 60-70% of the people living there identify as Palestinians, so you've created already Palestine.
Yep.
That's
It's a good argument. I mean, Jordan is a Palestinian state if you look at the population.
If you want to make a two-state solution, you want to cut away a part of Israel and make it into a Palestinian state, you already did that.
You did that.
You did it quite well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never recognized as such. Well, that story with Jordan keeps going. 1948, Israel declares independence. And I always ask people, did we win or lose the independence war? The answer is we won. Yes, but we won that war. We declared independence. Israel is born, but we lose to Jordan the biblical heartland. The real Israel, the original Israel, the kind of Israel that people 100 years ago, when you asked them, what's Israel? They would say Bethel. They would say Jerusalem. They would say Hebron. They would say Shiloh, Shechem.
And the Christians would say Bethlehem, of course.
Bethlehem, of course. And that part is annexed into a Jordan, not recognized as such as legal by international law by any country. A few countries recognize, but I think England recognized. But
England and Pakistan.
Right.
That's it.
But the world did not recognize it. And it laid in that status for a long time until 1967. 1967 came, the Six-Day War. Israel conquers, in our mind, liberates these parts of the ancestral Jewish land from an occupation by Jordan. But here comes the problem. The problem is that at that moment, Israel, in my opinion, should have recognized and annexed or asserted Israeli sovereignty over these areas. But it didn't do it. It left it in a quasi-status. It left it like a territory, like the United States has Guam or Puerto Rico. And it left it in this quasi-status. In the meantime, a fight started brewing over this chunk of land. Jews, like myself, believe that this is part of the mainland of Israel, and it has to be resettled. And so,
and by the way, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think it's important just so for the audience to understand that people say, well, the Jews came in 1967 into this land. Well, that's because for 19 years, under Jordanian rule, Jews couldn't live there.
Right.
They were thrown out. Right. They were thrown out of the old city of Jerusalem. They were thrown. So it's not as if
Gush Etzion.
It's not as if they came in to a territory that they had no rights to. It's that the Jordanians had thrown them out. So they were coming back to. It's like you steal my bicycle. I go to get it back, and I take back the bicycle from your garage and put it back in my garage. That doesn't sound, very offensive to anybody. That's really what happened. We took back our own land.
Right.
So go on, but keep going. I'm sorry.
Well, the point you make is very good, and that is why I was stressing the word resettled, and you filled it in. But the problem is that Israel, and there was something you said to me in conversation a few years ago. I never forgot it. You said to me, it's time for Israel to grow up. We've got to determine our borders. And what Israel did was it actually did not grow up. It began to resettle these parts, but at the same time not assert that sovereignty, probably because of the large Arab population that lived there and other reasons. And therefore there was the situation where Israel was holding on in part and not holding on in part. And an Arab population grew there as well. Later, Israel made what I understand a great policy error, which is to start to give away chunks of the land to a control of this newly formulated Palestinian Authority. And now you had a Palestinian Authority which was anti-Semitic, close to Jewish resettlements in this land, and a fight ensued.
Yeah, nothing good was going to come of that.
Right. And
we're talking about Oslo in 1993 and 1994, where they created these two sections of Judea and Samaria, areas A and B, that were essentially 100% governed by Palestinians, and Jews were left to Area C, where they would live. So you basically just took the population, divided them, separated them, created an environment for them to increase their hostility towards each other.
Right.
Because before Oslo, I don't know, I'm maybe a little bit older than you, but when I was a kid, like in 13, 14, 15 years old when I was here, we used to go to Ramallah to buy vegetables.
Right.
No problem. We used to drive there. It was easy. People were happy to see us. It was the Oslo efforts to separate when other people from outside decided, oh, these people cannot live with each other. They have to be separated. Like two kids, just separate these two children because they'll never be mature enough to live on the same territory. And it got worse.
Yeah. And you say vegetables. My mom says dentistry.
Yeah.
Driving lessons. You did your shopping there. You went into the Arab places, you felt safe. And the Arab population had not been brainwashed into a jihadist, extremist Islamic thinking against Israel, nationalist and religious thinking against Israel. And so you had a much more peaceful situation before peace.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the situation that we find ourselves. Then there became this, what we call today the Red-Green Alliance, the progressive jihadist alliance, where the left, the global left, started saying all kinds of things about Israeli abuse of the Arabs. And that became a language towards the liberal side of the spectrum. And on the Arab side, there became a more jihadist language, the kind of Hamas ideology that's being spoken. And those came out at the same time. They're really flip side of the same coin.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have countries like Norway and Spain and Ireland talking about the liberal rights of Palestinians that are being abused according to their narrative. And they kind of put out a kind of blood libel narrative that Israel's a constant abuser. And at the same time, you have a jihadism that's being promulgated in these territories. And at the same time, there are Jews who are either faithful or historically minded or understand defense and know that Israel has to hold on to these parts. So in part, I blame the situation on, and you said it, to me in conversation, which is in lack of clarity. Lack of clarity led to this situation.
Look, if you go to, if you ask people, fourth graders around the world, can you draw a map of your own country? Almost everybody can do it. Can't do it here because some people will draw the map on the Green Line, some people will draw it on the Jordan River, some people will start talking about the settlement blocks or the Alon Line or whatever. It's not becoming a first world country like Israel, a country which has done so much in so many areas to have its entire eastern border, its longest border, kind of up for grabs. Who should decide this issue? The UN, the Quartet, the United States? If anyone other than Israel decides this issue, I'm quite sure no one in Israel will be happy. So for Israel to kind of punt on this thing, it frightens me because it can't possibly lead to a good outcome. And when the time comes, the longer you wait, the more you want to say, look, this is our land, we're not giving it up, which some politicians have said, and you can say it, but it's hard to get taken seriously when you have a whole separate set of rules for what they call the West Bank. It's right. It's not sustainable. I hate to use that word because people say, well, it's been going on for a long time. 57 years in the Middle East is a second, right? So right. It really isn't sustainable. It's starting to fray. It's getting worse and worse. We see how American support is fraying. We see how the next generation of Americans are not going to be supportive of this. Democratic Party is moving away from Israel. Israel's got to address this issue pretty quickly, responsibly, but quickly.
And the way to address it is to speak with clarity and to have clarity of mind, to have clarity of vision. So, one vision is cut up these places and create them into a Palestine and have two states living side by side. But that has been debunked. It's been disproven that could happen. And not only that, the Gaza exercise, the disengagement where Israel left Gaza Strip, gave it to the PA, that became soon the Hamas ground. And the Hamas used it as a forward base against Israel. That's exactly what's going to happen in Judea and Samaria. I know very well, especially from Hebron, which is a Hamas-dominated city.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have a Hamas-dominated city in control of Hamas, south of Jerusalem, controlling the highlands. Because it's also important to say that maybe this is not the rationale to hold on to Judea and Samaria, but it's important to know that it is the high ground. It is a mountain ridge that controls the lowlands below it. It basically is the controlling area of Israel, militarily.
It's the equivalent of the Golan Heights for the north.
That's right. Okay, so the question is, and you said it, it's easy to be pundits to talk about the problems, but your book, I think, tries to begin to address solutions moving forward. And we think the solution is simple. Which is look at the Middle East, here's a region of the Arab world, but here, this small piece of land belongs to the Jewish people. That's true geographically, it's true historically, it's also true in terms of the Bible, in terms of the Christian text, and also even in terms of the Quran. People don't know this, but the Quran itself basically lays out that this land belongs to the Jews. Now, then the question becomes, if you're going to hold on to this land, you're going to so-called annex it, assert Israeli sovereignty over it, or even declare that this is the Israeli territories and we're going to continue to govern it one way or another, with clarity. So what do you do with the Muslim and Arab population there? That's the question. And that's the elephant in the room.
Yeah, and look, this is the way I look at it in the book. The only democracy in the Middle East, obviously, is the State of Israel. The only country that has demonstrated an ability to deal effectively and fairly with its minority population is Israel. Right. Israel doesn't take enough credit for this. It's really astounding how well integrated the Arab citizens of Israel are into Israeli society. They huge penetration into the most elite universities, into the most elite professions: law, business, medicine. You go to a emergency room at Hadassah Hospital, odds are you're going to end up with an Arab doctor that's going to treat you, and they're good. Pharmacies are almost always all dominated by Arabs. So Israel knows how to be fair and live within a Western system of human rights within its Arab population. Well, if they can do it in Israel, why can't Israel do it in Judea and Samaria? It's the same people, same Palestinians. The Palestinians living in Israel, I mean, they just hit the jackpot, because when the Green Line was drawn, they were inside Israel, and the ones that were outside the Green Line, were less advantaged. But why can't we bring those advantages to people who just by misfortune ended up being on the wrong side of the border? And again, we need to deal with what does it mean to vote, and how do you ensure that Israel remains one Jewish state? And I deal with it in the book. Don't need to get into the technicalities. I mean, obviously, there are places in the world that are pretty fountains of democracy, like America, right? Where you have places like Puerto Rico, which is sovereign territory of the United States, where the people don't vote in national elections, right? Nobody accuses America of being an apartheid state. So those issues can get resolved. But what I find most interesting about all this, because I think this is the answer. If you go to places in Israel that are entirely Arab cities, like Baqa al-Gharbiya or Al-Fahim, right, which is these are places where there's been from time to time some outbreaks of protest from the minority population saying, we'd like more rights, we'd like this. Some of them are right, and some of their claims are legit. But if you go to them, because we tried this when I was in office, and I think Victor Lieberman tried it years before, and said, look, guys, if you're really not happy, we can redraw the Green Line. And, if there's a Palestinian state, you'll be inside the Palestinian state. What do you think? What an outcry of protest to that. Right. They said, we never want to be outside the state of Israel. We want to be citizens of the state of Israel. That zehut, that citizenship, paper given to the Arabs in Israel is very highly valued, very highly valued. So I mean, I think that just cries out as the obvious solution. Let Israel assert its sovereignty over this territory. Take some time. It's going to take some time. Let them obviously go through a process of weeding out the ones who want to kill us. Right. If they want to kill us, we got to kill them first. Right. Okay. But I'm optimistic that most don't want to kill us, especially if they have a reason not to want to kill us. If there's a carrot as well as a stick, and then move from there. And I think that is the way. And again, it may cost some money. We have new friends that we've made over the past years with the Emirates. We'll make friends undoubtedly with the Saudis once we get the right government in place in the United States. I think those countries will be very comfortable if they understand that Israel is accepting responsibility now for the human dignity, the prosperity, the healthcare, and the education of the minority population, of the state of Israel, as that might be expanded to include Judea and Samaria. What do you think about that?
I think that sounds right, and I'll tell you a little joke from the Arab world. There's a joke that goes around like this. They say an Israeli Arab visits Jordan, and he goes to the hospitals, and he's like, what is going on here? What kind of hospitals is this? You go in, but you don't come out. What's the deal with this thing? And the Jordanian says to him, well, we haven't been occupied yet. And so many Arabs recognize that Israel is a harbinger of forward thinking, of rights and decencies, upward mobility, medicine, etc. But we're going to have to do work in digging out from the jihadism that we've allowed to develop, the hate for Israel, you called it, the folks that want to murder you. It's going to take time. It's not going to be easy, and we can't whitewash that because we've allowed generations upon generations to develop this anti-Israel thinking, and that anti-Israel thinking has metastasized.
I'll tell you what I think is more important. I mean, it's incredibly important what you just said, but I'll tell you what's more important. Changing the mindset of the Israeli population.
Right. Oh, so if I may interrupt you for just a second.
Sure.
You said something before that I think is just so important, so important. You said, well, Israel knows very well how to deal with its minorities. When you speak with Israelis and you say to them this plan of one Jewish state, they say, but we don't want to rule another people. Why do they say that? I think it's just some kind of like phrase, some kind of like meme, some idiom that's been out there. When you challenge them and you say, well, why do you say that? Every power rules other minorities and knows how to do it well. We do it better than anybody. We should be able to take minorities and deal with them. What's wrong with that? Let's not shrink away from dealing with peoples and shrink away from our land. Let's hold on to the land, govern the people, and do it in decency. And so that's something that we can do, but we've got to, as you were saying just now, I'll let you continue, we've got to educate the Israeli population to be able to just say that without faltering.
Well, I think they're making the assumption that the Palestinian population will be perpetually radicalized, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
That's, I think, the false assumption, because, again, the Arab population in Israel is not radicalized. We've seen, the aftermath of October 7th inside the Green Line. There have been some protests here and there, but they've been far less threatening than the protests at Columbia University.
Right.
So most Arabs inside of Israel don't want to jeopardize their status as citizens, don't want to jeopardize their lifestyle. And the question, the whole key to this is to create an environment in Judea and Samaria where the Arabs feel the same way. And this doesn't have to be, a hostile takeover. Again, it's going to take time to kind of parse through the radical, those who are radicalized and just want to pursue jihad and those who don't. And maybe I'm being overly optimistic in assuming the vast majority don't, but we'll see. But I think that's what people don't understand inside of Israel. The other thing is, and this is, I think, I'll just make 2 points and get your reaction to it. The first is not enough people in Israel really understand what Judea and Samaria is. You're living in Tel Aviv, you're living in Petach Tikva, or wherever you're living, Rishon LeZion. I mean, you just don't go there, right? And you don't really. You just read about it. It's so, even though it's so close by, it's just foreign to you. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the biblical history to really understand how precious this is to who we are. And I'll give you an example. I met once, recently with a secular Israeli, brilliant guy, entrepreneur, very wealthy, and we ended up, after talking a little business, we talked politics. And I asked him what he thought about Judea and Samaria, and he said to me, "Look, it doesn't really mean much to me. I haven't been there since I was in the army. Like you say, I don't want to rule over these people. I don't want to send my kids to fight for this land."
Right.
And I said to him, "Well, do you believe in God?" And he said, "Look, my parents are Holocaust survivors. I'm not really sure what I believe in." I said, "Well, let's pick a place." So we pick a place. I said, "Let's pick Shiloh. Do you know what happened in Shiloh?" And he says, "No." And I tell him about the fact that this is where Joshua brought the Jewish nation, after he brought them across the Jordan River into the land of Israel, 7 years in Gilgal, and then 369 years in Shiloh. Shiloh was the Jerusalem of Israel before there was a Jerusalem. Right. It's where the tabernacle rested. It's where Samuel the prophet was one of the greatest prophets in Jewish history. It's where Hannah taught the world how to pray. And he says, "What do you mean taught the world how to pray?" I tell him the story about how until then people were making sacrifices, and she wanted a child, and she poured out her heart to God. The high priest Eli thought she was drunk. And, I finished all this discussion about Shiloh, and I said to him, "Okay, look, I'm not an Israeli citizen. You are. What do you want to do? You want to keep it or you want to leave it? Just tell me. It's not my choice. It's your choice. Understand, if you leave it, it's gone. Palestinians want nothing more than to destroy the connection of the Jewish people to their biblical homeland. So it's gone. just like Kever Yosef, they're trying to destroy every day in Area A. So what's your thing? He goes, well, we have to keep it. I said, what do you mean? You're an atheist, you're a secular, because we have to keep it. I said, why not? Why? What's so important about it? He says, look, it's who we are. It's who we are. It's our DNA. It's our Jewish DNA. It's the stories that, kept us together for 3,000 years. It's why we're here today and all the other biblical nations are gone. And we have to keep it. I said, well, I can make this argument about 20 other places. He goes, we have to keep it all. And I said, yeah, but, we got a rule and this. And he says, we got to keep it. It's what sustains us. And I didn't understand it until... That argument can be made over and over again to secular Israelis, and it's not being made. It's just not being made. And, my second point, and then I'd like to hear a comment on both, is we can't force this on 50% or more of the country that's not ready for it. I mean, this is a lift. I mean, it is a process. It could involve, on the worst case, I hope it doesn't, but it could involve, some diplomatic, rough spots. There could be countries that don't want to do business with Israel. It could hurt the country in terms of their exports. Who knows? I hope not. I hope that we can make the case and have it accepted across the world, because it really is the best outcome from any perspective. But, if you remember what happened with, it seems like years ago, but it was still, this past year, judicial reform, right? Which I agree with judicial reform, right? But I didn't agree with the idea that you're forcing this upon people. If 50% of the country is against it, and for good reason or bad reason, if it's creating that kind of internal dissent, keep trying. Keep trying. Well, for something like this, which I believe is way more important than judicial reform, I'd love to get to a point where 3/4 of the country says, we agree. We're willing to fight for this. We're willing to stand with this. We're willing to take whatever the risk. This is the future of the Jewish people. And that one conversation I had with that one guy needs to get repeated over and over and over again. And if it takes a few years, let it take a few years. I mean, once we announce, when I say we, once the government of Israel says, look, this is our trajectory, this is where we're going, and everything we do going forward is going to be towards this goal, which will include, by the way, bringing in money to improve the infrastructure of the Palestinian communities, improving the healthcare, improving the hospitals, obviously improving and ultimately controlling the education, because we can't have the education continuing where it goes now. People are taught to hate Jews. That, I think, with that trajectory, and if the government continues to move, I don't care if it takes 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, but that's the way we have to move. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that.
Well, first thing I want to say, Ambassador Friedman, that was a very inspiring story. And that story itself, as you said, needs to be repeated, but that needs to be a policy. We need to say, to repeat that story, it's not you going around and
I can only do this, one person at a time, right? Yeah.
It's one Jewish state. It can't be just one David Friedman. We need to tell that story. And your story is instructive because it's really about narratives that exist inside our heads. And sadly, a lot of Jews and Israelis are simply ignorant of their narrative. And when you tell them, they're like, wow, I didn't know that. And they're fed kind of diseducation and fear, and so therefore they just don't know their stuff. And when they do know it, they're connected to it. So one of the projects that you made a great film that I had the honor of helping out with, which is the Biblical Highway, the Route 60, the Israel Biblical Highway, and that was a project aimed at telling the story of at least 7 biblical cities and also Christian sites. But the biblical cities include Beersheba, which is a biblical site of prophecy and where Abraham first reached out to Gentiles and started teaching them about the one God. And then Hebron, where the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs is, and where King David began his reign. Bethlehem, where King David was born, where Ruth came to from Moab and became a Jewish person, where the book of Ruth is written, where the tomb of Rachel is. Jerusalem, spiritual capital of the world, home to 2 temples and one day a third, hopefully. Then Bethel, which is the dream of the ladder. Jacob, on his way, running away from his brother, has this amazing dream of visualization of a ladder between heaven and earth. Shiloh, you told the story. And Shechem, where the tomb of Joseph is, where the Jews got the blessings of the mount out in the two mountains, the blessings and the curses. These places are intrinsic to the story of the Jewish people, to the DNA of our language, of our heritage. And when you know it, you love it. I'll tell you, sometimes I just think that we need one book, just one book. If I had to teach one book, it would be the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
It's a good place to begin, right? Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, if we could just teach people the amazing drama, the wars, the loves, the prophecies, the relationship between the first Jewish family and God and the land of Israel, just teach them a story. You don't have to believe in it religiously. It is a story of our peoplehood. I want to tell you one more little story that happened to me a few years ago. I was speaking to a European group, a young European group. I get to speak to a lot of groups, and I'm speaking to this European group, and they said to me, well, why are you here in Hebron? And I said, well, because of the Bible. And I saw that didn't compute for them. So I thought, okay, I'll make a simile for them. I'll make it clear for them. So I'm like, well, the Bible for me is like Homer for you. And they looked at me with blank stares. And I'm like, Homer, the Odyssey, the Iliad, Ulysses, Greek mythology. And they just looked at me with blank stares. And it took me some time to figure out that they, as we say in Judaism, they're not holding. They had not read these classics of European history. And so it was a tough moment for me to realize that they don't even have the concept of classics in their heads. So we do have to go on an educational, and I do hope that the One Jewish State book and this project will also be, along with it, as you just said, a project that may be a long-term project of teaching the stories, making people fall in love with their heritage.
I think the story sells the policy. I think the story sells itself. The book sells itself. There's a reason. Again, there is a reason why it's the best-selling book in history and continues to be today.
One Jewish State or the Bible?
I wish One Jewish State. Right now I'm talking about the Bible. But, it continues to be so important to so many people. But, you mentioned all these places. Here's the problem, among many. You want to go to Bethel, right? Again, almost every state in the United States has a town called Bethel, right? Because of the profound impact of that story of the ladder ascending to the heavens with the angels going back, Jacob's dream. You've been there. I've been there many times. I used to, support the community of Bethel.
I lived in Bethel. And
you lived there, right? If you go to the place of the dream of Jacob, where there's a little wooden sign there, you could break your axle on your car getting there. I mean, it's very inhospitable to tourists. You can get there, but it's really hard, and you really need an experienced guide. And a lot of guides, won't go there because they think it's dangerous, right? I'll take one more, which is a place I hadn't gone to until we made the movie, which is the altar of Joshua. Right now, this is on the downslope of Mount Ebal. Right, you see the valley, then you see the upslope of Mount Gerizim, where the blessings and the curses and all the Jewish nation was there. I mean, if you imagine the scene that took place there when Joshua brought the Jewish people to these two mountains where they received the blessings and the curses, and the whole nation was there. It's just an extraordinary. I can't even imagine, making a movie about that because it's so powerful. But the altar of Joshua, right? He was commanded to build this altar. Moses told him that he needs to build this altar when he gets to the land of Israel, and he builds this altar. And if you actually look at the text, and I point this out in my book, the phrase Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, we all say Am Yisrael Chai, right? The first time that the Jewish people are referred to as Am Yisrael, not Bnei Yisrael, which is what they were referred to on their way out of Egypt, but Am Yisrael, the first time was when Joshua built that altar, on the downslope of Mount Ebal. And why? Because it was the first time that the Jewish people were fulfilling a commandment of God in the land of Israel. Doing those two things together, they became the nation of Israel.
Wow.
To get there, impossible.
Right.
Impossible. I mean, first of all, you can't go there, okay, because you're an Israeli citizen, and it's an Area B, and Israelis are prohibited. So, one of the problems of teaching Israelis their history is that a lot of their history is now located, because of Oslo, in territory where they're not even allowed to go. It's a crime to go. They take their lives in their hands by walking in, okay? Non-Israelis can go. I can go, but even then, it's a little uncomfortable to go to these places. But then on top of that, it's on the downslope of a mountain. There's no road. You can't drive up and drive up to this altar. We approached it with a helicopter, and it took us like 20 minutes to find a place to land. Just because it had such a slope on it. And some people that came without the helicopter, Pompeo and I took the helicopter. Others took a car. They had to hike up there from a remote spot. This is one of the most significant biblical sites of the Jewish people, of our biblical history, and you can't get there.
Right.
You just can't get there. Now, Shiloh, to their credit, they built a visitor center, they got a tourist area, they got a place for souvenirs, but also your place, Hebron, right? I know you've been racking your brain out trying to build up Hebron into a place which is more accepting of tourists. So far, no. Right? And you got that road to get there, which, on a bad day, you want a bulletproof car, right? Tourists, when you tell tourists you're going in a bulletproof bus, it doesn't make them feel better, it makes them feel worse, right? Because, why are we in a bulletproof transportation? That's, and there's nothing holier other than Jerusalem, nothing holier than Hebron. What can we do to make these places more more hospitable to tourists?
Recently I had the great privilege of visiting the other God's land. I was at Niagara Falls with the family, and we went to the Canadian side, and we had a great time. And when I go to these kind of sites, more than anything, I look at how they do tourism. I just watch it. I see the gift shops. I mean, when you exit Niagara Falls attractions, you can't but pass through a gift shop. You have to exit through the gift shop. When you spend that money in the gift shop, you're like, I am so glad I have this thing, this knickknack. And when you have that knickknack in your shelf in Israel, you're like, oh, I'm so happy I spent the $15 to buy this silly knickknack. But it reminds me of the great time I had with my family at Niagara Falls. But the Canadians and the Americans understood when they saw Niagara Falls that this is a great resource. This is a great asset that they want to develop. They want to develop that asset. Sadly, in Israel, the consciousness that the Bible is an international asset that we can exploit, develop, teach, use. When you land in the airport in Israel, it does not say, welcome to the Holy Land. It does not say land of the Bible. And I don't mean that as the only narrative. There may be others, but even as a partial narrative, you barely hear that. So that's one of the errors, I think, that has been done in the past. And so therefore, another aspect of the one Jewish state is to highlight and bring out and actually develop touristically these sites. Tourism is not just fun. It's not entertainment. It's an education. It's a form of education. Shiloh has done a great job. I also know your a great love for the city of David. They've done a great job or a darn good job relative to Israel. I just mean to say we could even do it bigger. That's the idea of the biblical highway. We want to promote it. We want to teach it. We want to love it. We want to love these stories, fall in love with these stories. So there's really your second point, which is that these sites are not developed, comes on the heels of the first point, which is Israelis don't know the stories. If they knew the stories, they would want to develop it. They would love it. I think that there are elements on the political, progressive left that have been purposefully erasing that connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel and to the Bible and to those stories. And I think that they've really, in a systematic fashion, erased it from our minds. We've got to bring it back.
And look, I think we're paying the price right now in America. A lot of kids with high IQs are running around their campuses, seeing Israel as an illegitimate place,
right,
as a place that doesn't have the right to exist. And people are responding. People, on the left are responding, with arguments about, national security and arguments about, Israel really is better than you think. But the best argument, like when I was a lawyer, I used to be a litigator. We'd write a brief, point 1, point 2, point 3. You put your best point was always your first point, right? You lead with your best point. The best point is, listen, folks. Read the Bible. This land was given to the Jewish people. I didn't write the Bible. You didn't write the Bible. But the Bible's been around for 3,000 years. There's no other book of that vintage which provides a land grant to any other people anywhere in the world other than the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Now, get over it. That is immutable. It's not debatable. It's not something which, people say, well, I heard that Israel killed these innocent people, and I heard this, and you can debate, whether you're watching your news on Fox or Al Jazeera or Haaretz or Israel National News. I mean, you're getting different narratives depending upon where you get your news. Okay, but Lindsey Graham said something that I remember from 8 years ago. We were at a panel together. It was even before I became ambassador, and somebody said to him, Israel gets so much bad press, so much bad news about Israel. How do you deal with your constituents in South Carolina on these issues? How do you maintain in South Carolina such a pro-Israel stance when throughout the United States they're getting their news and it's unfavorable to Israel? And he says, my people get their news from the Bible. That's where they get their news. And I thought that was such an interesting observation, but it's true. And it's true in lots of places, but we don't lead with that. And I'm not saying there are not a lot of other arguments. So we'll get to it now. I want to turn to it now in a second. We got other arguments. We got national security as well. You served in the military with distinction. We'll talk about that for a couple of minutes. But point one of our brief needs to be, this land was given to the Jewish people by God in the Bible 3,000 years ago. And you know who says that? It's the very first Rashi, as we all know. It's the very first Rashi. Yes, why even have the book of Genesis, right? And this is 1,100 years ago. Rashi, one of the greatest commentators on the Bible, said it's only for one reason. We don't need to know about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Those are great stories, but we can live without those. They exist for one purpose, to create in the Jewish people the irrevocable title to the land of Israel. So when nations come and say, this land doesn't belong to you, you say, no. The world was created by God, and God had the right to give this land to whoever he wanted to, and he gave it to us. This was 1,000 years ago, right? We were fighting the same stupid fights 1,000 years ago as now. And Rashi said, lead with the Bible. That's your best argument.
Right.
Let's quickly turn to national security, because it's not just about faith, right? And it's not just about creating, a better economic life for the Palestinians, by exporting the way we treat, the way Israel treats the Arabs inside the Green Line. It's also life and death, right? Yeah. And you're there all the time. You're there every day. How does that factor in? Can the Israeli army ever leave this land? And shouldn't it be more invested, not less invested, in Judea and Samaria?
When you shrink away from land, the first thing is that it's anti-Middle Eastern. What I mean by that is the jihadism as an ideology understands Israel is shrinking. I've had many discussions with Arabs. I have them a lot. And I can boil them down to basically the following. It goes like this. I say to them, I always start with, Allah loves you. He's given you 22 countries. He's given you 400 million children. He's given you oil coming out of the ground. Allah loves you. But Allah has given this land to the Jewish people. Look with your own eyes. You have fought 100 years of wars against us, and you haven't defeated us. We're still here. We still have our sovereign place. Why is that? I say to them, because Allah grants us this land, and He's granted you that. And they say to me always, yes, Yishai, that is good. But you have left the Sinai, you have left South Lebanon, you have left parts of the West Bank, you have left Gaza, what they call Gaza, and you're shrinking. Allah is with us and we are patient. You will go away like the Crusaders. That is an average Arab has that consciousness. What I mean by that is, when you shrink away your land, you think you're making some kind of concession, some kind of deal, some kind of, what's it called, when you kind of cut in half and you...
I hate to think about it. Is there a word for that?
When you...
We should use it.
You make some kind of compromise.
Right.
But you're not making a compromise at all. You're actually completely empowering the jihadist elements who believe that Israel will go away. So that's issue number one.
That was the view of the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Sure.
Right. He said there's no way you can shrink your way into peace.
You cannot shrink your way to peace. That's exactly right. And every single place that we've shrunken away from has become a forward base of the jihad against us. So, okay, if Israel shrinks away, we have to use it through the negative. If it shrinks away from these places, basically, and I remember that when you were serving as ambassador, I came to the White House, to the old executive office building, and presented a map with the heights, a topographical map of the region. And I said, look, if you give this land away to the Palestinian Authority, the missiles will be now ready here to strike at Jerusalem, which is in the heart of Judea and Samaria. People don't say that, by the way. Jerusalem is the center of Judea and Samaria.
Yes.
Right? And the mountain region which is what Judea and Samaria is, will control the rest, and there'll be missiles on the whole thing. And you can't stop it. Jihadism it's the real pandemic.
They're so short range.
Right.
We just saw with the murder of those 12 beautiful children playing soccer.
Right.
Right. That was the Iron Dome couldn't stop it because it came right over a mountain, right down into the soccer field. It just happened so fast. There was no way to intercept it. So your point is very accurate.
Ambassador, when we were protesting the Gaza disengagement, our arguments were not religious. We were not making religious arguments. We had religious sentiment, but we did not make religious arguments. We said, if you give away Gaza, it will become a front line of the jihad. They will take it over, and they will tunnel, and they will use missiles, and they will use balloons and everything else in order to attack us constantly. And we were right. And that was a military understanding, and we were right very quickly. It took 6 months for Hamas to take over and to begin this process of militarization, and that led to October 7th. And I'm sorry to say, people say to me a lot of times, they're like, "What did October 7th change for you?" I said, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the truth is nothing. It changed nothing for me. It just fulfilled what I foresaw.
That's what people ask me all the time. I go on, U.S. News, and they say to me, why did it happen on October 7th? Was it because it was Simchat Torah? Was it because there were rumors about normalization with Saudi Arabia that threatened them? Why was it October 7th? I said, because it wasn't October 6th. It was because they could. Why did they do it that day? Because they could. If they could have done it a day earlier, if they could have done it a year earlier, 2 years earlier, they've always wanted to do this. This was the day when our guard was down, when they felt this is the day to do it, and they did it, and they succeeded, unfortunately. But it's not because they were somehow rationally reacting to an adverse stimulus. This is what they do for a living. It just happened to be that they actualized it on October 7th.
Indeed. And so we can't have that keep happening. And the Palestinian Authority, I have Palestinian Authority television in my house. I turn it on. I don't need more than 30 minutes because it is 30 minutes filled with anti-Israelism and blood-curdling brainwashing. So, okay, if we're going to give these people control, they are going to turn it into an army against the now shrunken Israel. That does not make sense. It simply does not make sense. And the current administration in the United States, that as a reaction to the attack, the October 7th attack, came out with a rationale, oh, now that they've attacked you, now there's a war, we should keep doing this by giving away more of the small land of Israel to the jihad. It simply does not make sense, and it will only promulgate, I try to explain this to people, you think you're being rational, but you are only promulgating an eternal war, a war for generations. And the only thing that I find that really strikes people is when I say to them, you're just rolling this war down to our children. They're going to have to fight a more intense war and a more intense war, just like those who disengaged from Gaza caused us to fight a more intense war. Let's not. Let's hold on to this land, have one Jewish state, have minorities that are well adjusted within the land, a strong Israeli defense. A strong Israeli defense will also lead to a suppression of the jihadist impulse in the region, and then other countries like a UAE, like a Saudi Arabia, like a Morocco, can come underneath what was one of the most miraculous and amazing things that you were at the forefront of, which is the Abraham Accords. That's what has to come out. Abraham Accords is the opposite of jihadism.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I met afterwards, we did this very quickly, and then we used to follow up. And even after I left office, I would go to Abu Dhabi, meet with my friend there, Sheik Abdullah, who's a terrific guy, and we filmed it. We filmed a series with TBN for that. But what I asked him is, what's really at the core of the Abraham Accords? And he says, look, it's just the victory of the moderates over the jihadists. That's what it is. That's all it is.
Simple.
And we have to win in every country. Every country is fighting this battle right now. America's fighting this battle. Israel, all the moderate Sunni nations are fighting this battle, and the moderates just have to win. And the way the moderates win, okay, is by forming together an alliance that basically pushes the jihadis out. And what's interesting to me, from a security perspective, I speak to people in the military. I remember I used to speak to people in the Shin Bet when I was in office, and they would say to me, the greatest national security threat for Israel is if Israel has responsibility to govern Judea and Samaria. And I say, why? Well, we can't do it. We can't put people there. And I said, I don't understand something. I'm totally missing this. I do occasionally watch that show Fauda, to kind of, now I don't know how realistic it is, but I also know that you're sending people in often, to what you call mowing the lawn, but basically you're sending people into Jenin, you're sending people into Ramallah, you're sending people into Shlem. Dangerous places, and the Kasbah's there where you're fighting hand to hand, door to door. So when you say that you don't own it, I would disagree. I think you own it. I think anytime there's territory out there which is a imminent risk to the Jewish people, okay, you own it, whether you like it or not.
Right.
So why not own it for all purposes? Why not, get in there, assert your sovereignty, be in a position to alter the facts on the ground, build some schools, build some hospitals, create a better environment. You own it anyway, but at least, and you'll be there, and your military will be there, and you'll have better, instead of just, having these guys that dress up as Arabs and infiltrate, you'll actually be there, and you'll show the Arab population, that this is Israeli sovereign territory. And many of them will want to work within that framework because they see Israel as a far better governing force than the Palestinian Authority.
I want to tell you a story about that.
Yeah.
I have an important story that also helps understand the psychology of the region. And the psychology here, it's important to understand the Middle East psychology.
Yeah, for sure.
If you don't understand it, then you're talking Western talk and Western paradigms, it's just not going to work here. But this is such an illustrative story. And one of my colleagues and one of my mentors, Dr. Noam Arnon, presented, maybe 10 years ago, a plan to one of the important sheikhs in Hebron. It's Sheikh Jabri, but not the one that the Farid Jabri. Mm-hmm. He presented a plan to him that is very much akin to One Jewish State, the title of your book. And he presented this plan to him, and he laid it out, and he said to him, listen, Israel's going to govern this land, and you're going to be residents with upward mobility, and this is how it's going to work, and you're not going to have this corrupt PA on you. And the sheikh looked at Noam, and he said, I like it a lot. Now you're going to have to force me. And if you force me, and he didn't say these words, now I'm adding, if you force me, I'll follow it and we'll all be happy. And I'm adding here again, don't force me to now wave the Israeli flag. Don't force me to read out loud from Herzl or from Rav Kook, okay? Force me, but I will go along with it because it's good for me. But remember my Arab pride. Remember my national and religious pride. Don't make me now say that I've embraced blue and whiteism all the way. Respect my needs to show my people that, okay, so you force me now, therefore I can accept this. I mean,
historically, the Palestinian people, which really are kind of a brand more than a real people, right? The Palestinian people have never self-governed, right? They've always lived under the sovereignty of another nation. And, compared to the Turks or the Brits or whoever else, I mean, Israel will provide by far the best standard of living and the best opportunities. And they know that. And
we have to be willing to say we are taking responsibility for those people.
100%. I think that changes the narrative completely. We're not, there is no argument that we're an occupying force. We say all the time we're not occupiers, and we make that argument because we say this is our land. You can't occupy your own land. And I agree with that. But we're also not acting as landowners either, right? And that's the problem. We've created this fuzziness that has allowed people to make all kinds of arguments that are unfavorable, and not all of them have good answers. I mean, the one thing that, the one approach that I think, again, is not debatable is if Israel says, look, we will take responsibility for the health, welfare, human dignity, safety of every single person that lives within our sovereign territory. Okay, here's how we're going to do it. We'll do it with help from our friends in the Gulf. We will do it in a way that doesn't force people to give up whatever, whatever religious national pride they have. I mean, like you say, they don't have to wave a blue and white flag. They do have to live in peace within our society and accept Israeli sovereignty. And by the way, I mean, we're already there. I mean, we don't make the Arab members of the Knesset, take a loyalty oath to the government, which to me is a little bit incredible. I mean, I went to work for the U.S. government, right? The first thing I had to do was put my hand up on a Bible. I didn't swear about it because I affirmed, but I said I will support and uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign or domestic. Now, anybody who has responsibility for the welfare of a country should say that to their country. Israel doesn't make the Arab members of the Knesset do it, and they think it's outrageous that somebody would ask them to. So I keep saying, Israel has, in its effort to appear fair and sensitive to its Arab minority, I think has gone farther than any other country has gone with regard to their minority. I point out something which is not a point of pride for America, but when in World War II, when America was bombed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii wasn't yet a state in America. Pearl Harbor was bombed. It's about 5,000 miles away from mainland America. What did America do? They rounded up all the Japanese living in America, but absolutely nothing to do with this. Nothing to do. They were proud American citizens. Put them in internment camps. That's what America did with this massive country with protections from two oceans, Canada and Mexico. They rounded up the Japanese, put them in internment camps. Israel has no border, right, where it has real true peace, right, where it doesn't have to worry about infiltrations. No, Israel is at war still with Lebanon and Syria, and it still has to worry about infiltrations from Jordan and Egypt. It still has to worry about from the sea, and it has real enemies, right, real enemies living inside its country. Never went that way. Never went that way. Always respected the human rights of their Arab population. It's a great track record that really can be expanded, and we should take pride in it. We should export it. But we don't need to commit suicide.
No.
We have no national obligation to commit suicide.
If we commit suicide, we're only harming also the Arab states as well. The Arab states need us to be strong. And I think that there's one issue that we haven't talked about, at least the way I understand it. There's just one more issue that is out
please.
there. That's Iran.
Yeah.
Iran is a player that is playing chess. Somebody said they're playing chess, we're playing checkers. They're playing chess. They've laid out their pieces now in South Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen, and in truth, people who know that they're also pushing into Jordan now. They're basically surrounding us on all sides. There's another fifth chess piece, which is on American campus, and maybe even in Washington. And these guys are playing to win. They want to destroy Israel. They want to destroy the Saudi control of the Arabian Peninsula. And they want to take over Mecca and Medina. And these guys are playing to win.
Yeah.
And what actually the Arab world wants and needs is a strong Israel to be a defense umbrella in this region. And that will bring to better economy for this region, better tourism for this region, and more medicine for this region. Israel can spread out a little bit. I don't mean control-wise, but relationship-wise. And so there's these... How did you say that they said at the UAE? It's either jihadism or
moderates.
It's the same thing. It's either Iran or Israel.
Yeah.
In terms of spreading out a.
Listen, most of the world, if it's Iran versus Israel, most of the world is siding with Israel. It's incredible to me how, and this is profound disappointment with the Biden administration, because when we left office, Qasem Soleimani was gone, right? The leader of the Iran terrorist movement. Their GDP was under $200 billion. Their GDP now is about $450 billion. They increased it. They more than doubled it in less than a couple of years. They took all that money. They gave it to they bought weapons for the Houthis, for Iraqi Hezbollah, for Lebanese Hezbollah, for the Syrians, for Hamas. But the crazy thing is America allowed this to happen. So, people say to me, shouldn't you be happier with the American response now? They've kind of helped Israel in their time of need. Biden came to Israel. We got 12 ships now, around the area protecting us against Iran. Yeah, it's great, but we're being protected against a threat that never should have emerged. Mm-hmm. And it's insane to me that Iran has grown so much. Look, America, the UK, the French, the Germans, the Japanese. I mean, any one of them could take out Iran. We could take them out 10 times. We could set their economy back 50 years. Almost all their oil is distributed on a single island, Kharg Island, which, they try to protect, but no match for America, no match for Israel. And yet, under the Biden administration, they've really appeased and placated Iran. And you're absolutely right. That is the tip of the spear. It's the head of the snake, whatever metaphor you want to use. And we absolutely have the ability and the power to fix this, but what we haven't. And this is the one area, more than anything else. We try not to get too political on this show, but this is the area where the Democrats and the Republicans, where President Trump and Kamala Harris are the most different and where there's the most risk for the state of Israel?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also an opportunity. I think that you've laid it out, that there's an opportunity to strengthen our identity, strengthen our borders, speak with clarity. In biblical terms, we call that the transition between Jacob and Israel. Jacob is how we exist when we're in the diaspora. We work within other people's systems. When we're in Israel, we have to speak with clarity. It means, the word Israel means straight, a kind of a straight manner. And that's what we have to do right now. We have to get to clarity. I think that your book is pushing that consciousness forward. And I hope that it's read widely in policy circles. And I hope to see you back in office again as well.
Thank you. Yishai Fleisher, pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
My friends, One Jewish State is hot off the presses. Just been published. It is the intellectual foundation for Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. It's a book which makes the case for Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria as being good for Israel, being good for the Palestinians, being good for the region, being good for stability, and I would add, it achieves God's will as set forth in the holy texts. So I hope you'll buy the book. It's available wherever you buy books. Obviously, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can get it at lots of different places. You can just Google it and find it, and they'll ship it to you overnight. And it is One Jewish State, the last best hope for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Enjoy the read.